My name's Craig Theo, and I'm the Research Director here at the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar to discuss our recent report about local source revenue options in Michigan. Our report was released 2 weeks ago and is available free on our website. I'll also mention that the slide deck today has been posted this morning and is available in the resources section under presentations if you want to follow along with the slides that we'll be sharing with you. Before getting into the webinar material, let me remind you who we are. The Citizens Research Council is a statewide, nonpartisan public affairs research group. In 2016, we celebrated our 100th year of operation. A longevity we attribute to our promotion of informed public policy for state and local governments through the provision of accurate, independent, and objective research. I also want to remind you that we are a private, not-for-profit entity. As such, we rely on the charitable contributions of foundations, businesses, and corporations. I'd like to encourage all of you to join our circle of supporters and help us to continue to provide high-quality, independent information on important policy topics in Michigan. You can learn more about the Research Council at our website, www.crcmich.org. At the right of our website, you'll find an opportunity to sign up for our email distribution list to be notified about newly released papers, reports, and presentations. Many Michigan local governments have been facing fiscal pressures for years. Spending pressures come from both internal and external forces, including financing mounting legacy debts and personal costs driven by healthcare. On the revenue side of the equation, the local property tax poses the largest challenges. The hit to the tax base resulting from the Great Recession and the housing bubble bursting, combined with a host of property tax limitations, have taken their toll on local government coffers. The fiscal squeeze is definitely on for many local governments. In response, a number of steps have been taken to address these growing spending and revenue pressures, including collaboration among local units, expenditure cuts and service reductions, and increases in currently available revenue sources, primarily property taxes and fees. Many of these options have been pursued for years, some with limited success and others with little in the way of measurable fiscal savings. Some observers believe it is time to consider new models for local government revenue and service delivery structures that can meet local needs and grow with the economy. A recent CRC report addressed the expenditure side of the equation and recommended consolidating many local government services and providing them more regionally, perhaps at the county level. In our current report, we turn the focus to local source revenue options. Specifically, the Research Council takes a closer look at the revenue side of the equation and recommends that the state consider allowing local units of government in Michigan to levy more types of local option taxes. The key component to the recommendations in both of these reports is the need to look at how services can be delivered and revenues can be levied at the regional level of government. The webinar today begins with a short discussion of some of the key fiscal challenges facing local government and why more consideration should be given to local option taxes. Next, attention is paid to the menu of local option taxes currently available in Michigan, as well as those that are not authorized. This involves a national comparison, noting which states permit their local governments to levy specific taxes. We spend some time discussing what the other Great Lakes states authorize, keeping in mind that, as a state, Michigan is often compared to its neighbors. To wrap things up, our presenter will share thoughts about guiding principles on what constitutes good tax policy and the appropriate level of government for levying local option taxes. We will leave some time at the end for questions and answers. The presentation today will be given by Jill Roof, our local government expert working out of the West Michigan office. Jill's been with the Research Council since 2016 in her current position. Previously, she worked for the Council from 2005 to 2010 in our Livonia office, spending her time analyzing statewide ballot questions and K-12 education matters. Jill has degrees from Grand Valley State and Wayne State University. Please note, we're recording this webinar and we'll post it on our webpage where it will be available for future viewing. Also, the slide deck is posted under our presentations link, as I previously noted. We have everyone but the presenter on mute, so we will not be able to hear you if you speak up. To ask a question, please type the question into the questions pane that should be appearing on your screen. You can type these questions anytime during the webinar, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. If for any reason you have a technical problem and need to notify us, please let us know by calling 517-485-9444. Finally, after the webinar, you're going to receive an email soliciting your feedback. We'd greatly appreciate your candid response so we can make these a better product going forward. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Jill.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here this morning to talk about local source revenue options in Michigan. As Craig outlined in his introduction, local governments in Michigan are facing pressures, revenue and spending pressures from many sides. With these pressures, local officials have been left with fewer options over the years, such as further downsizing the menu and depth of service provided to residents and businesses in their communities, collaborating, working with neighboring communities and county governments to achieve economies of scale in the provision of services, or seeking to replace revenues by increasing property tax rates or levying alternative local taxes. These have not necessarily been bad options, but the local units have been pursuing these options for years. And as Craig outlined in this and another recent report that we did last year on counties in Michigan, the Research Council is attempting to outline potential next steps for local government now that they have tried all these options. Our research suggests that it is time to adopt new models for local government revenue and service delivery structures. We'll start by talking about what are the problems with the current local government fiscal structure. Michigan's local government revenue structure, which is primarily made up of local property taxes and state revenue sharing, has not proven to provide a sufficient level of revenue for local governments in times when the state economy is declining, nor in times when the state economy is expanding after a decline. The local property tax captures only a narrow segment of economic activity, and the economic recovery evident with bustling downtowns and job growth does not translate into growing revenue streams for local governments. Local communities need ways to benefit from tourism, commerce, and other activities that can lead to increased daytime populations and the need for increased expenditures in their communities. The property tax was not intended to serve as the sole source of revenue for local governments in Michigan. Property tax limitations in state law limit the rate, base, and growth potential of local property taxes. The tax revenues collected by the federal and state governments are capable of recovering from recessionary conditions simply through the growth of tax bases, growth in sales and in income. Local property taxes in Michigan do not post-recession expansion of the economy because of the tax limitations in state law. Michigan's system of state revenue sharing, as well as some other programs of state aid, such as highway funding, were created as part of a specific state policy to contribute state-raised funds to the local government revenue structure, and they were intended to provide some diversity in the local revenue structure in place of local option taxes. This system works well when state revenues are strong, but it has proven an easy funding source to cut when state revenues are declining to allow state policymakers to use revenue sharing dollars to fill state budget holes. This graph highlights the levels of constitutional, statutory, and unfunded state revenue sharing from fiscal year 1981 to fiscal year 2017. As you can see, the unfunded portion of state revenue sharing dollars has grown steadily since the early 2000s. Since 1998, revenue sharing losses total more than $8 billion. In fiscal year 2017 alone, the shortfall was over $800 million. The problems with Michigan's local government fiscal structure are not limited to the revenue side of the equation. As we mentioned, a previous Citizens Research Council report titled Counties in Michigan, an Exercise in Regional Governance, discusses the current local government service delivery model in detail. This model includes over 1,700 cities, villages, and townships, and 83 counties providing overlapping services across the state. With modern methods of transportation and communication, this is not an efficient local government service delivery system. In this report, we examine local services in detail to see what could be provided more efficiently by the county rather than the city or township. Services that the county could play a bigger role in providing can include back office functions, information technology, HR, finance services, tax collection, elections, property assessing, roads. County sheriffs can assume responsibilities for policing or provide support services to municipal police and fire departments. Doing this could free up local government resources to direct on the vital services remaining with cities, villages, and townships, including the developing of the identity and placemaking that will attract businesses and people to their communities. This realignment of local government service delivery can and should be done in conjunction with local revenue and tax restructuring. So one potential solution that we talk about in the report, that our report is about, to the problem of Michigan's local government fiscal structure is to provide local units of government with more access to local option taxes. The current local revenue system is not meeting the needs of vibrant, growing local units or of declining local units experiencing disinvestment. Some cities need to relieve residents of burdensome property tax rates. Other cities need ways to benefit from the positive economic growth that is occurring within their jurisdiction. Local option taxes could be crafted to replace, not supplement, property taxes. A revenue-neutral implementation could allow for taxes more responsive to future economic growth. So let's talk about the different kinds of local option taxes, both those currently authorized in Michigan, as well as those that are not currently authorized, but may be options for expanding local option taxes in the future. The authority to levy any local taxes in Michigan is provided in state law. Any local tax currently levied is specifically authorized in state law. Expanding local option taxes can have advantages and disadvantages. Advantages include diversified revenue sources. More tax options allow local units to reduce their reliance on the property tax and state aid. Local option taxes allow local units to levy taxes on a tax base that reflects an area's economic strengths, for example, tourism. And they increase local autonomy by giving local officials and voters more options to pay for desired local services. One big disadvantage to local option taxes is that they can increase the combined state and local tax rates in an area. However, that does not have to be the case. Tax changes can be revenue neutral, but allow for greater growth potential in local taxes in the future. Local option taxes can create or increase economic disparities among local units in a state because the revenue generating capacity is not evenly distributed across the state. High-income, property-rich local units, those that can most easily meet their revenue needs with property taxes, generally possess more local option tax capacity than low-income, property-poor local units. Those that most need the additional tax revenue generally have the least ability to raise revenue through new taxes. Local taxes can also make local governments more vulnerable to economic downturns, as many local option taxes are more connected to the economy and therefore more volatile than the property tax. This also can give them greater growth potential. We will discuss this later in the presentation, but some of these disadvantages can be ameliorated by levying new local taxes at the regional rather than local level. This graph illustrates that the state levies many more types of general taxes than local units can levy in Michigan. It is missing some minor taxes levied by local units across the state, but for the most part, local units collect large sums of revenue from local property taxes and small amounts of revenue from city income taxes. The state collects large sums of revenue from income, business privilege, sales-related, property, and transportation taxes. A local option income tax is available to cities in Michigan. It is not authorized to other types of local government in the state. 23 out of 276 cities currently levy an income tax. Those cities range from small cities with under 2,000 residents to the largest cities in the state. Rates are generally set at 1% for residents and corporations and 0.5% for non-residents, but some cities have had higher rates written into the law. In order to levy a city income tax, two things must happen. First, an ordinance in support of a city income tax must be adopted by legislative action of the city council or commission. And second, city residents must vote in support of the tax at the ballot. A city income tax can supplement dwindling property tax revenues or allow cities to lower their property tax rates. It also allows cities to export part of the tax to workers who reside in surrounding communities. A city tax is more closely tied to the economy than a local property tax because employment levels fluctuate with the economy and an income tax is directly tied to employment levels. Therefore, income tax revenues are more cyclical than property tax revenues. Perhaps the biggest negative associated with the current city income tax is that it is authorized to the most local level of government. Local income taxes can create disincentives to live or work in the cities that levy them. However, it is not clear that the disincentives created by city income taxes are any different than those created by city property taxes levied at high rates relative to surrounding communities. One way to address this concern would be to authorize local option taxes at the county or regional level of government. Of cities that levy an income tax, approximately 56% of tax revenue comes from the income tax and 44% from the property tax. These figures only include city tax revenue and omit some additional taxes levied in Detroit, but give a general idea of the percentage of tax revenue coming from each source. This chart shows that city income tax revenues have not experienced the level of growth from fiscal year 2005 to 2016 that state income tax revenue have and median household income have. City income tax revenue have declined in some years, but over the period grew at approximately 7%. State personal income tax revenue grew approximately 52%, and the median household income grew about 24%. Both city and state income taxes reflect economic fluctuations, but city income tax revenue also reflect the out-migration and loss of income in the state's largest core cities. 18 states, including Michigan, authorize some sort of local option income tax. 7 states allow counties to levy an income tax, and 14 states allow one or more of their cities to levy an income tax. Some states allow both counties and cities to levy the tax. When looking specifically at Michigan's neighbors, Michigan has the lowest rate of corporate income taxes as a percent of total state and local tax collections among all the states except Ohio, and one of the lowest individual income tax rates. This suggests that expanding local option income taxes in Michigan would not make Michigan uncompetitive with its neighbors. A retail sales tax of 6% is authorized to the state government in Michigan. The rate limit is set in the Constitution, and most of the state sales tax revenues are either constitutionally or statutorily earmarked to specific purposes, such as the school aid fund and state revenue sharing, among some others. A local sales tax is not currently allowed, and Michigan's Constitution fails to explicitly address the question of whether local units of government could be allowed to levy a local option sales tax with state authorization. The wording of the Constitution does not make it clear if the 6% rate limit applies just to the state or to the state and all of its political subdivisions, local units. The question of whether authority to levy a local sales tax could be granted by the state is further complicated by the earmarking provisions related to the sales tax. A 1970 Attorney General opinion concluded that local units are without the authority to levy a sales tax because of the constitutional earmarking provisions. The reasoning was that the constitutional restrictions on all sales tax revenue would require local units to levy taxes for the benefit of other local governmental units through revenue sharing restrictions and the school aid fund. While it is not clear exactly what would be required to authorize a local option sales tax, constitutional and statutory impediments to a local sales tax in Michigan do exist. At a minimum, it would require the state to pass a law authorizing local units of government to levy a sales tax. It could require a constitutional amendment, which would require a statewide vote of the people to either explicitly allow for a local option sales tax or to ease the rate and earmarking restrictions. Once a constitutional amendment or state law was enacted, a local sales tax would still need to be voted on by each and every jurisdiction wishing to levy the tax. A sales tax is fairly transparent, meaning that it is usually obvious to the taxpayer what they owe and why. Sales taxes tend to be more popular than property and income taxes for a number of reasons, including the fact that people have more control over whether or not they pay the tax. That is, people can choose not to make a purchase if they wish to avoid the tax. It is harder to choose not to pay income or property taxes. They can generate large sums of money with fairly low rates, and sales taxes allow communities to export part of their tax burden to non-residents who work in or visit their community. Local sales taxes can lead to tax avoidance if it is easy for individuals to cross local borders or shop online to avoid sales taxes. High local sales tax rates can also affect business location decisions. 37 states allow at least some of their local units to levy a local option sales tax. 4 states do not levy a state or local sales tax. Alaska does not levy a state sales tax, but does allow local sales taxes. And an additional 9 states do not allow local sales taxes, but do have a state sales tax. And that group includes Michigan. When comparing state and local tax rates, Michigan is 38th, tied with Kentucky with a rate of 6%. When looking specifically at Great Lakes states, Michigan's sales tax rate is lower than all the states except Wisconsin, which has an average combined state and local tax rate of 5.42%. Michigan and Indiana are the only Great Lakes states without local option sales taxes. Authorizing local sales taxes in Michigan would not make the state uncompetitive with its neighbors. The bigger issue, though, with local sales tax rates and competitiveness will play out at the local level across the state. Motor fuel and vehicle-related taxes can include specialized sales or excise taxes on motor fuel and vehicle registration or license fees. These are generally earmarked for transportation purposes. Michigan does not allow for local option motor fuel or vehicle registration taxes, but the state shares much of this transportation tax revenue with local governments through the Michigan Transportation Fund, which distributes revenue to the state trunkline fund, county road commissions, and cities and villages. While the revenue is shared, local units are beholden to the state for this transportation revenue. Some type of local motor fuel tax is authorized in 11 states. 38 states have some type of local motor vehicle license or registration tax or fee, or the state shares taxes with local units. Public utilities users taxes include taxes levied on public telephone, electric, steam, or gas services. Michigan does not levy state or local utility excise taxes, with the exception of Detroit, which is authorized to levy a 5% utility users excise tax to support the police budget and the city lighting authority. This map gives an overview of state and local utility taxes. All states levy at least a general retail sales tax or a selective state or local sales tax on utilities. Some states levy both a general sales tax and a selective sales tax on utilities. In the Great Lakes states, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania all do not have a local utility tax. All of those states except Michigan do have a state utility tax. Illinois and New York both levy local utility taxes. Sin taxes include taxes on any goods or behaviors considered to be vices or sins, including alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, casino gambling, and soda or sugar taxes. As these taxes increase, people usually indulge in the behavior less, so they can lead to declining revenue streams. As tax rates increase, the incidence of tax avoidance increases, either through shopping across state or local lines or through the black market. All states levy excise taxes on alcohol, but only 8 states authorize at least some of their local units to levy taxes on alcoholic beverages. And we can see some of these states are Great Lakes states: Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. 13 states allow at least some of their local units of government to levy local cigarette taxes, including the same Great Lakes states that allow local alcohol taxes. As of 2014, Texas accounted for almost half of the retail cost of a pack of cigarettes. Medical marijuana became legal in Michigan in 2008 when voters passed a statutory ballot proposal allowing for the use of medical marijuana for patients with certain debilitating medical conditions. Recreational marijuana remains illegal under state law. A proposal to legalize it is being circulated in the hopes of making the 2018 ballot. And medical and recreational marijuana are both illegal under federal law. In 2016, a state law was enacted to begin taxing medical marijuana at a rate of 3% of a distributor's gross retail receipts. These tax revenues will be shared with local units of government in Michigan. 30 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized medical marijuana, and 8 additional states have legalized recreational marijuana. Medical marijuana taxes are authorized in 6 states, and 7 more allow for local taxes on recreational marijuana. 1 state taxes both. Michigan initiated Law 1 of 1996 authorized 3 licenses in Detroit for the privilege of operating a non-Indian casino. These 3 casinos are taxed by the state and the city of Detroit. These state and local taxes are borne by both residents and non-residents who gamble in the casinos. Expanding these taxes beyond Detroit would require expansion of privately owned non-Indian casinos. 24 states allow for the operation of commercial casinos, and local governments in 15 states, including Michigan, benefit from casino gambling taxes. Selective sales taxes on soda or other sugary beverages are not authorized to state or local governments in Michigan. In fact, in 2017, a state law was enacted to explicitly prohibit any local government from imposing an excise tax, sales tax, or fee on the manufacture, distribution, or sale of food for immediate consumption or non-immediate consumption to preempt any local sugar taxes. West Virginia is the only state to levy a statewide excise tax on bottled soft drinks, and 6 cities have adopted soda or sugar taxes. A soda tax was enacted by the Cook County Commission in Illinois in 2017, but was repealed shortly after due to much opposition. Other taxes discussed in the paper include severance taxes, tourism-type taxes, taxes on hotels, restaurant meals, and car rentals, entertainment or admissions taxes, parking taxes, 911 and phone-related fees, and sharing economy taxes, which include ride sharing and home sharing. Multiple state laws allow select counties and cities, but not all, in Michigan, to levy hotel motel accommodations taxes and taxes on restaurant meals and car rentals. These taxes can be levied to support tourism-related needs and convention centers. The Stadia or Convention Facility Development Act allows selected counties and cities to levy a 1% tax on hotels and restaurant meals and a 2% tax on car rentals. Wayne County levies this tax on hotels and car rentals. The legality of a local option sales tax on restaurant meals has been questioned in the past, and the issue has never been fully resolved by the courts or state law. The question is a gross receipts tax on restaurant meals considered a sales tax and therefore subject to the state constitutional limit of 6%? If and how a restaurant tax is different than a hotel or car rental tax is not clear, but the tax has never been levied, so the question has never been resolved. The Excise Tax on the Business of Providing Accommodations Act permits select counties to levy a tax of up to 5% on hotel accommodations in Michigan. The State Convention Facility Development Act authorizes an accommodations tax to be levied by Wayne, Macomb, and Oakland counties to support the operations of Cobo Hall. The tax rates that can be levied range from 1.5 to 5% on hotels outside of Detroit and 3 to 6% on hotels in the city. Additionally, convention and visitors bureaus across the state can levy accommodations assessments of up to 5% depending on the size of the county. Whether these assessments are technically taxes that must be paid or voluntary agreements is not clear. With all these laws considered together, total accommodations taxes can be quite high in some areas, for example, Detroit, and can vary dramatically across the state. These types of taxes include all types of excise taxes on entertainment, amusement, and recreation goods and services, including tickets to concerts, sporting events, and cultural events, merchandise sold at these events, cable television and Netflix and other streaming services, and recreation activities such as skiing, bowling, etc. These types of goods and services are not generally taxed in Michigan. There's no special entertainment or admissions tax, and some or possibly most are not subject to the sales tax. In the Great Lakes states, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and Pennsylvania all have local entertainment or amusement type taxes. Expenditures for entertainment and recreation services are discretionary, which suggests 2 things. 1, those with higher incomes are more likely to use those services at higher rates, and 2, it may be a volatile source of revenue because discretionary expenditures tend to decline during bad economic times. Some other taxes we discuss in the paper include parking taxes, which are not authorized locally locally in Michigan, but the state does levy a tax on public parking vendors at the Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport and shares most of the tax revenue with Wayne County. Counties in Michigan have authority to levy phone-related taxes to support 911 services. 22 other states allow local units to levy a similar type tax. The sharing economy encompasses the new economy that has expanded in recent years around the idea of sharing goods and services. For state and local governments, the biggest tax and regulation issues revolve around ride-sharing services from companies like Uber and Lyft, and home sharing services through companies like Airbnb and HomeAway. These services are not taxed the same as more traditional services like taxi services and hotels, which means that state and local governments may be missing out on a potential revenue stream. They are also not regulated like more traditional businesses, which raises questions about equity. Ride-sharing services are starting to be taxed more. In the Great Lakes states, Chicago, Philadelphia, and New York State all levy specific taxes on ride-sharing services. Home sharing services are more often being subjected to hotel accommodations taxes. For example, Airbnb has started voluntarily collecting state and local accommodations and sales taxes. Additionally, some localities have levied taxes specific to short-term rentals, including Boulder, Colorado, Chicago, and Memphis. Before we move on to discuss how these different taxes may or may not work in Michigan, I want to take a minute to talk about Detroit. We released a short paper on diversifying local source revenue options in Detroit as a companion paper that takes a closer look at local taxes in Michigan's biggest city. Detroit has the most diversified local tax structure in the state. Throughout the years, Detroit has faced unique financial and revenue problems, and the state has been attentive to Detroit's revenue challenges and has provided the city with exclusive local option revenue sources to address its funding needs, including the highest city income tax rate in the state, a utility users excise tax, and a casino gambling tax. Even with its diversified tax structure, many of Detroit's revenue streams have suffered from the city's decline. Current city revenue trends are not reflecting the resurgence in economic activity taking place within parts of the city. We don't have time here to go in depth on taxes in Detroit, but if you want more details, please see our short paper titled Diversifying Local Source Revenue Options in Detroit. In that paper, we look more closely at the local taxes in Detroit and compare Detroit to other cities in the Great Lakes Midwest region of the country. When analyzing the menu of local option taxes that could potentially be available to local governments in Michigan with state authorization, it helps to take a closer look at the local option taxes authorized by Michigan's neighbors. This table highlights the Great Lakes states and which local taxes each state provides authorization to levy. Of 17 local option taxes, all local units in Michigan have access to one, property taxes. All Michigan cities have access to one more, income tax. Counties have access to one more, 911 taxes. Some counties and cities have access to three more, restaurant, hotel, and vehicle rental taxes. Detroit has access to two more taxes, utility users and casino gambling taxes. And the state shares three more taxes with local units, medical marijuana, motor fuel, and vehicle registration fees. As the table illustrates, Michigan's neighbors allow their local units to levy more types of taxes. This table compares Michigan to its neighbors in terms of population, median household income, and general revenue and tax revenue from owned sources using U.S. Census Bureau data. In general, Michigan is smaller than its Great Lakes neighbors in population with a lower household median income. When looking at own source revenue per capita, Michigan is significantly below the national average and is lower than all other Great Lakes states. On local tax revenue per capita, Michigan remains below the national average, and only Indiana collects less local tax revenue per capita than Michigan. After detailing the different types of local taxes levied across the country, we attempted to answer the question of what would make good tax policy in Michigan by analyzing some general principles of good tax policy, the implementation potential of different taxes in Michigan, and the need for regional taxes and services in the state. While it is not possible to foresee the future and tell what will happen if local option taxes are expanded in Michigan, it is possible to discuss the economic implications of different kinds of taxes. We don't have time to go into detail here, but in the paper we address how well each type of local tax would meet some general principles of good tax policy, including adequacy, does the tax generate adequate revenue, transparency, reliability, equity, both horizontal and vertical. Horizontal equity looks at how people in similar financial conditions are treated. Vertical equity looks at how people in different financial conditions are treated by a tax. Neutrality is the criterion that taxes should be structured so as to minimize interference with economic decisions in an otherwise efficient market, and administrative efficiency. The implementation potential of a tax refers to the ability of a tax to be adopted and implemented by local units of government in Michigan. It is important to understand the steps that need to be taken to implement any new local tax in Michigan. First, the state needs to pass a law authorizing local units in Michigan to levy any new local tax. The Michigan Constitution gives local governments the power to levy taxes subject to the limitations and prohibitions provided in state law. Second, in order for local units to levy a local option sales tax, it may be necessary to pass a constitutional amendment, which would require a statewide vote of the people to either explicitly allow for a local sales tax or at least a rate increase and some flexibility in the disposition of any additional sales tax revenue. Third, once the state constitution and state law allow for a local tax, then the legislative body of a local unit has to pass a resolution or ordinance to levy the tax at whatever rate is desired by the local unit and allowed for in state law. And finally, the local voters in each jurisdiction need to pass any new local tax before it can be levied by any local unit of government. Once the necessary steps have been taken to authorize a new local option tax, it is important to understand what level of local government is best suited to levy local option taxes. While cities and townships are the primary provider of services, they may be the level of government that is least well suited to impose various local option taxes. With cities and townships levying local taxes, you would have 1,700 plus potential taxing jurisdictions, which would reduce the administrative efficiency of the taxes, as well as decrease their equity and neutrality and increase competition among local units. Allowing the most local unit of government to levy local taxes could introduce economic distortions by allowing individuals and businesses to adjust their tax burden fairly easily by changing the jurisdictions in which they live and do business. Authorizing local taxes at the most local level could also intensify socioeconomic disparities because the local units most affected by high property tax rates and reduced state revenue sharing have the least ability to raise additional local revenue through new tax options. Some of these concerns over economic distortions, socioeconomic disparities, and local competition can be addressed by authorizing the levy of local option taxes at the regional level. Counties are already governing at the regional level. Regions would still compete for tax revenues, but it is more difficult for individuals and businesses to alter their behavior by leaving a region than it is if they simply have to move to the next closest unit of local government. Socioeconomic and income inequalities are decreased at the regional level because counties are made up of both high and low income local units. Levying local option taxes at the regional level promotes a form of tax-based sharing that benefits the state as a whole. The biggest hindrance to levying taxes at the regional level is the fact that most services are provided at the most local level, creating a mismatch between those raising the revenue and those providing the services. This mismatch could be addressed in two ways. First, the Research Council in both this report and another recent report on counties in Michigan recommend reorganizing local government revenue and service delivery models to allow counties to levy more local taxes and provide more services. Regional taxation and service delivery are best suited to today's economy and would allow governments to take advantage of modern methods of communication and transportation. If that is not desired, another option would be to raise revenue at the regional level, but then create a system of distributing or sharing those revenues with all local governments within a region. It is also important to understand what kinds of taxes are best suited to what types of governments and areas. Local income taxes are best suited to cities and regions that are commerce and employment centers. Local sales taxes are best suited to cities and regions that can draw people in to shop in them and are unlikely to lose purchases due to people choosing to shop elsewhere. Tourism and entertainment taxes are best suited to cities and regions that invite tourism due to their urban nature, their shopping or tourist destination, for example, Frankenmuth, or their proximity to natural beauty, for example, the lakeshore. The key linking all these taxes here is that for the most part, they are best suited to regional areas where multiple local governments can benefit from the new local tax without facing direct competition from a neighbor that may choose not to levy the same tax. Moving forward, the discussion needs to continue on regional tax base sharing, regional services, and regional governance. Providing services and raising taxes at the regional level can address a lot of the concerns around local government service delivery and local option taxes. It is time to give local units of government more tools to meet their revenue needs while requiring them to work together to provide services more regionally when possible. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jill, for sharing your research findings with us today in this webinar. I understand from a couple of folks that there were some technical audio difficulties. We apologize for that. We will have a clean version of the audio up on our website when we post the webinar there at a later date. We've had a few questions come in, and I'm going to share those with Jill here. There's also time if you've got a question to type it in the questions pane, and we'll get to it. Don't be shy. Jill, here's the first question. It comes in asking about your research and what you found in other states, maybe the Great Lakes states, with these local option taxes. What was the general level of government that was levying the local option taxes in those states that were authorized? You talked about Illinois, I think, and some of the sin taxes, as well as some of the other Great Lakes states, I think Pennsylvania and New York. Was it at the city level, county level in those states? Do you have any insights to share?
It really varied. For the most part, they were authorized to counties or cities. Some states allow them to both, so you have some with overlapping taxes, or you had some laws where the county could levy in the unincorporated areas and the city could levy in the incorporated areas. I would say a lot of local taxes are authorized to the county level in other states, but it definitely varied.
Okay, and if I'm correct, I think I am on this. Our recommendation, to the extent we have one, is if we go down this route, is to kind of push those local option taxes up to the county level to kind of minimize some of those distortions that we see with very localized local taxes. So we would be kind of following suit in what our neighbors in the Great Lakes and nationally have done on this local tax option discussion.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. We have a question that came in. It's kind of on the other side of the fiscal structure issue on the service provision, and it says, do any Michigan counties currently provide human resources or administrative services to their local units of government? And if so, which ones? Do we know of anything?
Definitely some do. There's, we have for, the last 10 to 15 years been doing research on local government services and how they're provided and who provides them. We've done some reports looking at specific counties, but the most recent report I was talking about just looked at state law and what could be done. We don't have the detailed data on what each county is doing, but I do know that there are counties that are providing more services collaboratively, and some I don't want to list specific services, but I would say both Oakland and Ottawa counties are areas where there's a lot of collaboration going on between counties and local units.
Related to the question about the service provision, can you remind the listeners who may not have read that previous report, some of the services that we talked about elevating to the county level? And I assume those would be services that would be relieved from the city and township and village kind of responsibility, and then the regional tax would fund those services. What would some of those services be, just for our listeners?
Yeah, in the report, we kind of look at what services are provided, and we talk about the fact that the county could really play a bigger role in providing back office type functions. It would all start with information technology. We would need the county to be connected with all its local units. But and then it could provide the human resources, document services, finance services. The county could take a bigger role in tax collection, in conducting elections, in assessing property, in maintaining roads that are currently under city or village jurisdiction. In certain aspects of planning and land use, we looked at county sheriffs and what services they provide. And in some areas, county sheriffs are providing policing services, but that could be done more across the state, or the county sheriffs could provide the support services, specialized police forces, administrative services for municipal police and fire departments. So those type of services, but we go in detail in the report on what services are provided, how they're provided, what state law says, and what potentially could be done at the county level.
One other question came in. Again, this is someone who says they haven't read the report in its entirety, but we're wondering if there were any specific recommended local option taxes that the Research Council has made. And I think I know how you're gonna answer this, and suggest that we aren't making any firm recommendations on this, but I'll let you respond.
Yeah, this report discusses what is done in Michigan, what could be done based on what's done in other states, and we definitely, recommend allowing local units to levy more taxes to give a more diversified local revenue structure, and we would definitely, I think, recommend levying those at a more regional level so more local units could benefit from them and we lessen competition and socioeconomic disparities. But we don't make specific tax recommendations in the report.
Right. And I think one of the things we also add in the report is that opening up the menu to more diverse revenue structure could be paired with a restructuring of the current tax climate in a local unit, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it would result in a increase in the net tax burden immediately. We talk, I think, a little bit about restructuring taking place in a revenue neutral type of environment, but just exposing the local government tax base to potential for greater growth going forward. Is that right?
Yes, definitely.
We're done with the questions that here we come. I've got one more came in, so let's read this. It's a long one. Are you aware of any research on citizen satisfaction with service provision at the regional versus local level? That's the question. Then a statement, kind of trust in government is usually highest at the most local level. This is the love our congressman, hate Congress type of thinking. Would going to more regional service delivery approach introduce concerns with citizen engagement, satisfaction, etc.? So the question is research on citizen satisfaction with services provided at regional versus local level.
I don't have any specific research to guide to that. Through the research we've done throughout the years, I would say this is probably one of the reasons why we don't recommend consolidating local units of government into regional bodies. We're maintaining, people do like their local governments and like to be able to be very connected to their local units of government. We're discussing how can we keep government local and keep people connected to their local government, but allow some service improvement or cost savings in providing some back office type services that don't that people are less aware or connected to how they're provided at a more regional level.
Right. I think general citizens don't care if the payroll for the local government employees is done by a regional entity, a county entity, or if it's done by their township official HR person. Obviously, if the township employee is having a problem with their payroll and they're getting their paycheck, they'd like to be able to just go down the hall and talk to the local government officials handling it and not have to go to the county or regional level. But by and large, the services that we've been talking about elevating to the regional level are those back office, and then some that people just don't realize who's running the service, whether it's an election, they don't know that it's a township official, and probably could care less if it's a township official that's responsible for it, versus someone who's technically assigned to a regional body or county level of government.
Exactly.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. You will be getting a survey asking you for your opinions. Please fill that out. We look forward to getting your comments. And with that, I'm going to end today's webinar. Again, thanking Jill for leading us through the discussion. Thank you and have a great day.